The rain tapped against the windows of the corner brew cafe like tiny fingers trying to get in. It was one of those quiet Tuesday afternoons where time seemed to slow down, where the world outside felt distant and the warm glow inside felt like a small sanctuary from everything else. Behind the counter stood a young woman wiping down the espresso machine for what felt like the 100th time that day. Her name was Maya, and she had been working at this little cafe for 3 years now. 3 years of early mornings, aching feet, and the endless cycle of coffee orders and polite smiles. She knew every regular customer by name, knew who took their coffee black and who needed extra foam on their cappuccino. She knew which tables got the best afternoon light and which floorboards creaked when you stepped on them. Maya was 28 years old, though some days she felt much older. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the cafe's standard uniform of a black apron over a white shirt. There was nothing particularly remarkable about her appearance. She looked like any other waitress in any other cafe in Portland. And that's exactly how she wanted it. The cafe itself was small but had character. Exposed brick walls gave it that rustic charm that coffee shops seem to love these days. Mismatched wooden tables and chairs were scattered around, each one different from the next. Old movie posters hung on the walls alongside local artwork that changed every few months. String lights dangled from the ceiling, casting a warm amber glow even during the daytime. It was the kind of place where you could spend hours reading a book or working on your laptop, and nobody would bother you. But what caught most people's attention when they first walked in was the piano. It sat in the far corner, an old upright that had seen better days. Someone had donated it to the cafe years ago, back when the owner thought it would be nice to have live music occasionally. That never really happened. Now the piano was mostly furniture, something people noticed but rarely thought about. Its keys had yellowed with age, and a thin layer of dust covered the surface. Customers sometimes set their coffee cups on top of it while they grabbed a chair. Maya passed that piano dozens of times every shift. She had walked by it so many times she barely saw it anymore, or at least that's what she told herself. The truth was different. The truth was that every single time she walked past it, something inside her chest tightened. Every time she heard someone joke about playing it or saw a child press down on the keys, her fingers would twitch involuntarily. Her hands remembered, even when she tried so hard to forget. On this particular rainy afternoon, the cafe was nearly empty. An older gentleman sat by the window reading his newspaper, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. A couple in the corner were having a quiet conversation over tea, and near the door a teenage girl sat alone, scrolling through her phone while her hot chocolate grew cold. Maya was restocking napkins when she heard it. The sound of a single piano key being pressed, then another, then a stumbling attempt at a melody. She looked up and saw the teenage girl had wandered over to the piano. The girl was poking at the keys with one finger, trying to play something simple. It sounded like a beginner's exercise, the kind of thing you'd find in a first-year lesson book. The girl played the same phrase 3 or 4 times, each attempt a little different, none of them quite right. Her timing was off. She hesitated between notes, unsure of herself. After the 4th try, she laughed at her own mistakes, shook her head and walked back to her table. It was nothing, really. Just a bored teenager killing a few minutes, but Maya stood frozen behind the counter. The dishcloth hung limply in her hand. Her breath had caught in her throat. That melody, she knew it. She knew every note, every phrase, every place where your hand had to stretch to reach the next chord. She knew it the way you know your own name. Her fingers began to move on their own, playing the notes in the air against her apron. Her muscle memory was doing what it always did, what it had done for years even when she tried to suppress it. The melody ran through her mind in perfect clarity, complete with harmonies and dynamics and all the small details that turned simple notes into actual music. The cafe owner, Mr. Davidson, was a kind man in his 60s who had run this place for almost 20 years. He looked up from the register and noticed Maya staring at the piano with an expression he'd never seen before. Her face had gone pale. Her eyes had this distant look like she was seeing something far away. He walked over to her quietly and put a gentle hand on her shoulder. She jumped slightly, pulled back to the present moment. "You okay?" he asked softly. Maya nodded quickly, maybe too quickly. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just zoning out." Mr. Davidson glanced at the piano, then back at her. He'd known Maya for 3 years and had never seen her go near that instrument. But something in her face right now made him curious, made him wonder. The cafe was almost empty. They hadn't had a new customer in over an hour. "Go on," he said, nodding toward the piano. "We're not busy. If you want to try it, go ahead." Maya felt her heart start to pound. "Oh no, I don't. I can't or won't." His voice was gentle, not pushy. "Just curious." She didn't have an answer for that. The truth was complicated. The truth was buried under years of bills and responsibilities and choices she'd had to make. The truth was that part of her life felt like it belonged to someone else, a different version of herself that no longer existed. But her feet were already moving. She found herself walking toward the piano like someone in a dream. The few customers in the cafe didn't pay much attention. Why would they? Just a waitress on her break, probably about to peck out some simple tune. Maya sat down on the worn bench. The leather was cracked and faded. She could feel the uneven stuffing beneath her. Up close, the piano looked even older than she'd thought. Some of the keys stuck slightly when pressed. The whole instrument desperately needed tuning. But none of that mattered right now. She placed her hands on the keys. They felt cool under her fingertips, smooth and familiar despite the years. How long had it been? 10 years? 11? She'd stopped counting after a while because counting made it hurt more. Her hands were shaking. She took a breath, then another. The cafe around her seemed to fade away. The rain outside, the soft conversation from the couple in the corner, the rustle of newspaper pages, all of it became background noise. There was only the piano now, only the music waiting inside it, and then she began to play. It wasn't the simple melody the teenage girl had attempted. It was what that melody could become, what it was meant to be. Her fingers moved across the keys with a confidence that surprised even her. The hesitation was gone. The fear melted away. She wasn't playing the basic version. She was playing the real thing, complete with all the harmonies and counter melodies that made it beautiful. Her left hand provided a rich foundation, while her right hand sang the melody. Then they switched roles. Then they came together in a way that made the old piano sound better than it had any right to sound. The music filled the small cafe, transforming it into something else entirely. Maya's hands trembled as they hovered over the keys. She could feel every eye in the cafe on her now, though she wasn't looking at anyone. Her heart was racing so fast she thought everyone must be able to hear it. The last time she had played a piano, really played one, she was 17 years old. That felt like a lifetime ago. It felt like a different person entirely. Back then she had been standing on a stage in San Francisco. The lights had been bright and hot on her face. Hundreds of people sat in the audience, but she hadn't been nervous. Not even a little bit. She remembered the weight of her dress, the way her hands had felt steady and sure. The absolute certainty that this was what she was meant to do with her life. That competition had been the biggest moment of her young life. The National Youth Music Competition. She'd placed second, which everyone said was incredible for someone her age. People had called her a prodigy. Her teacher, Mrs. Chen, had actually cried when the results were announced. "You're going places," she had said, hugging Maya so tight she could barely breathe. "Juilliard is going to love you." And Juilliard had loved her. The acceptance letter had arrived 3 months later. Full scholarship. Her father had framed it and hung it on the living room wall. Maya remembered that day so clearly. Her father had picked her up and spun her around even though she was too old for that. Her mother had cooked her favorite meal. They'd sat around the dinner table talking about New York, about her future, about all the concerts she'd perform and all the places she'd travel. Her little brother had been annoying, as usual, making jokes about her becoming famous and forgetting about them. She'd thrown a dinner roll at his head. That was the last truly happy family dinner they'd had. 2 weeks later, her father went to the doctor complaining of back pain. He thought he'd pulled something at work. He was a contractor, always lifting heavy things, always on his feet. It seemed normal, routine, nothing to worry about, but it wasn't nothing. The test came back and the word cancer entered their lives like an unwelcome stranger who refused to leave. Aggressive, the doctor said. Advanced. They used a lot of other words too, medical terms Maya didn't understand at first. Her mother had sat very still in that office, her face blank, while Maya's whole world tilted sideways. The treatment started immediately. Chemotherapy, radiation, experimental drugs that cost more than Maya had known medicine could cost. Her father got sicker. The bills piled up. Her mother worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Maya had deferred her enrollment at Juilliard. Just for 1 semester, she told herself. Just until things stabilized. Just until her father got better. She got a job at a local restaurant, working nights after spending days at the hospital. Her little brother was only 14, still in school, still needing someone to make sure he ate dinner and did his homework. 1 semester turned into 2. Then a year. Then her father died on a Tuesday morning in March, and Maya felt like part of her had died with him. The medical bills didn't die, though. They kept coming, relentless and crushing. Her mother couldn't handle them alone. Her brother needed to finish high school, needed to have a chance at college himself, so Maya kept working. She told Juilliard she needed another year. Then she stopped returning their calls. What was the point? That dream belonged to a different girl, one who lived in a different world where things like music school were possible. In this world, there was rent to pay and groceries to buy and debt collectors calling at all hours. The piano in her childhood home got sold to help pay the bills. Maya hadn't even cried when the buyers came to take it away. She'd felt numb by then. Numb was easier than feeling everything else. That had been 11 years ago. 11 years of working whatever jobs she could find. 11 years of not playing, not listening to classical music, not letting herself think about what might have been. She'd gotten good at pushing it all down, at pretending that part of her didn't exist anymore. But now, sitting at this dusty cafe piano, all of that came rushing back. Her hands found the keys like they'd never left. The muscle memory was still there, buried but not gone. She started with the simple melody the teenage girl had been trying to play. But her hands couldn't stay simple. They wanted more. They remembered more. The melody grew and expanded. Her left hand added depth, creating a foundation of bass notes that made the whole piece richer. Her right hand found harmonies, little details that turned the simple tune into something alive. She wasn't thinking about what to play. Her hands just knew. They remembered years of lessons, thousands of hours of practice, all the pieces she'd learned and loved. The cafe went completely silent. The older man by the window had lowered his newspaper. The couple in the corner had stopped talking mid-sentence. Even the hiss of the espresso machine seemed quieter. Everyone was listening now, really listening. Maya didn't notice any of them. She was somewhere else entirely. She was back in her childhood living room, practicing for hours after school. She was in Mrs. Chen's studio, learning how to make the piano sing. She was on that stage in San Francisco, feeling the music flow through her like electricity. She was in all those moments at once, and the grief of losing them hit her like a wave. Her playing became more intense. The song was supposed to be gentle, something calm and sweet. But Maya couldn't keep it that way. All the emotion she'd been holding back for 11 years came pouring out through her fingers. The music swelled and grew, becoming something bigger than the original melody. It became about loss and sacrifice and dreams deferred. It became about her father and the bills and the scholarship she'd never used. It became about every time she'd walked past a piano and forced herself not to look. The old upright was out of tune and some of the keys stuck, but somehow that made it more powerful. The imperfection was honest. It matched how Maya felt, broken in places but still capable of making something beautiful. When she reached the end of the piece, her hands were shaking again. She let them rest on the keys for a moment, feeling the cool ivory under her fingertips. Then she lifted them away and the silence rushed back in. That's when she realized she was crying. Tears were running down her face, dripping onto the dusty piano keys. She hadn't even felt them start. How long had she been crying? Had anyone noticed? She looked up and saw that Mr. Davidson was staring at her with his mouth slightly open. The old man by the window had tears in his eyes too. The couple in the corner were holding hands, looking at her like they'd just witnessed something sacred. And the teenage girl, the one who'd played the simple melody, was holding up her phone. Maya's stomach dropped. Had she been recording? For how long? But she was too emotionally drained to care much. What did it matter? So some kid had a video of her playing piano. Nobody would see it. Nobody would care. She stood up from the bench on shaky legs and walked back to the counter without making eye contact with anyone. Mr. Davidson followed her. Concern written all over his face. "Maya," he said softly. Where did you learn to play like that?" Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and tried to pull herself together. Her face felt hot, and she knew it must be red and blotchy from crying. Mr. Davidson was still standing there, waiting for an answer to his question. Where had she learned to play like that? I took lessons as a kid, she said quietly, which was technically true but left out about 1,000,000 important details. It was a long time ago. Mr. Davidson looked like he wanted to say more, but a customer walked in and the moment passed. Maya was grateful for the interruption. She threw herself back into work, making coffee and wiping down tables, trying to pretend the last 15 minutes hadn't happened. But her hands were still shaking and she kept making mistakes. She gave someone the wrong change. She forgot to add sugar to an order. Her mind was somewhere else entirely. The teenage girl left about an hour later, waving goodbye with a shy smile. Maya waved back automatically, already forgetting about the phone, about being recorded. It didn't cross her mind again. Why would it? Kids recorded everything these days. It probably went straight to some social media app where it would get 3 likes from her friends and then disappear forever into the digital void. Maya finished her shift and went home to her small apartment. It was tiny, just a studio with a kitchen area that was barely big enough to turn around in, but it was hers, or at least she paid rent on it. She heated up leftover rice and vegetables, ate while watching an old sitcom, and fell asleep early because she had to open the cafe the next morning. She didn't have a smartphone, just an old flip phone that could make calls and send texts, and that was it. It was cheaper that way. She didn't have a computer at home either. There'd never been money for things like that, and besides, what would she use it for? She worked, she paid bills, she slept. That was her life. Simple and small and safe. So when her phone started ringing the next morning at 6, she had no idea that anything had changed. It was probably her mother calling to chat before work, or maybe Mr. Davidson checking if she could come in early. But it wasn't her mother. It was her friend Lisa, who worked at the bookstore down the street, and she sounded almost frantic. Maya. Oh my God, Maya, have you seen it? Seen what? Maya was barely awake, fumbling to make coffee with one hand while holding the phone with the other. The video. You're everywhere. My entire feed is just you playing piano. Maya's brain couldn't process this. What are you talking about? Yesterday at the cafe? Someone recorded you playing and it's going viral. Like actually viral. I've watched it 4 times already and I'm crying every time. Maya's stomach dropped. The teenage girl. The phone. How many people have seen it? I don't know, the number keeps going up. Last time I looked it was at like 200,000. Maybe more by now? 200,000. The coffee pot slipped from Maya's hand and shattered on the kitchen floor. Hot coffee and broken glass spread across the tile. She stared at it, unable to move. Maya, you still there? I have to go, Maya whispered and hung up. She cleaned up the coffee mess in a daze, barely noticing when a piece of glass cut her finger. 200,000 people. That couldn't be right. That was impossible. Lisa must have been exaggerating or reading the number wrong. But when Maya got to the cafe that morning, she knew immediately that something was different. There were people outside waiting for the doors to open, which never happened on a Thursday. Mr. Davidson was already inside, looking stressed and overwhelmed. There you are, he said when she walked in. My phone hasn't stopped ringing since yesterday evening. News stations, radio shows, some woman from a talent agency. Everyone wants to know about you. I don't understand, Maya said, though part of her was starting to. Mr. Davidson pulled out his laptop and turned it toward her. The girl who was here yesterday, she posted the video of you playing. Maya, you need to see this. Maya looked at the screen and felt the world tilt. There she was, sitting at the cafe piano, her face partially visible from the side. The angle wasn't great and the lighting was dim, but you could see her hands moving across the keys. You could see the emotion on her face. And the sound, even through a phone's microphone. Even with the piano being out of tune, it was clear that something special was happening. The video had been posted with a simple caption. The waitress at my local cafe just did this. I don't even know her name. But it was the comments that made Maya's hands start shaking again. There were thousands of them. Tens of thousands. She started scrolling, reading them faster and faster. This is the most beautiful thing I've heard all year. I'm literally sobbing at my desk at work right now. Who is this woman? Someone needs to find her and get her on a stage. The way her hands move. That's years of classical training. How is she working in a cafe? This made me start crying and I don't even know why. One comment had over 15,000 likes. "I'm a professional concert pianist and I can tell you this woman is the real deal. That's not amateur playing. That's someone who's had serious training. Where did she study? Why isn't she performing?" Maya kept scrolling. The comments went on and on. People were tagging their friends, sharing it to other platforms, breaking down the technical aspects of her playing. Classical music forums were analyzing her technique. Local news blogs had picked it up. Someone had created a thread trying to figure out which cafe it was, what city, who she was. "It's at 1.3 million views now," Mr. Davidson said quietly. "That number at the top. That's how many times people have watched you play." On 3 million. Maya couldn't breathe. That was more people than lived in her entire city. That was more people than she'd ever met in her whole life. All of them had watched her cry while playing a dusty piano in a cafe where she served coffee for minimum wage plus tips. She sat down hard in one of the chairs. "What do I do?" "I think," Mr. Davidson said gently, "you might want to start by reading some of these messages I've been getting." He pulled up his email. "This one is from Portland Community News. They want to interview you. This one is from a classical music magazine. This one," he paused, scrolling down. "This one is from the Portland Conservatory of Music." Maya's head snapped up. "What? A Dr. Patricia Williams?" "She's the director there. She watched the video and wants to talk to you." He turned the laptop so Maya could read the email herself. The message was professional but warm. Dr. Williams introduced herself, explained that she'd seen the video, and said she recognized the level of training Maya must have had. She wanted to meet, to talk about Maya's background, to discuss possibilities. She left her phone number and email address. At the bottom of the email she'd written, "Talent like yours doesn't just disappear. Whatever circumstances led you away from music, I'd like to help you find your way back. Please call me." Maya read it 3 times. Then she noticed another email. This one from a music producer who wanted to record her, and another from a non-profit organization that helped artists who'd had to leave music due to financial hardship, and another from someone offering to pay for the cafe's piano to be professionally restored if Maya would keep playing there. The offers kept coming, filling the screen with possibilities Maya had stopped letting herself imagine years ago. Outside, the crowd waiting to get into the cafe had grown larger. Someone had figured out which location it was. They wanted to see the piano, wanted to meet her, wanted to hear her play again. Maya's phone rang. It was her mother this time, crying happy tears, saying she'd seen the video and was so proud. The next week passed in a blur that Maya could barely process. The cafe had become something she didn't recognize anymore. People lined up outside every morning hoping to catch a glimpse of her or hear her play. Some brought flowers. Others just wanted to take pictures. Mr. Davidson had to hire extra help just to manage the crowds. Maya felt like she was living in someone else's life. Strangers recognized her on the street. Her phone, that simple flip phone that usually sat silent for days, wouldn't stop ringing. News reporters camped outside her apartment building. The local morning show wanted her to come on and talk about her story. A popular podcast reached out. Even her landlord had seen the video and told her she was an inspiration, which felt surreal coming from a man who'd threatened to evict her 6 months ago when she was late on rent. But it was the emails that kept her up at night, the offers and opportunities that seemed too good to be true. Maya would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Dr. Williams from the conservatory, about the scholarship she'd mentioned, about the work-study program that could help with living expenses. She thought about the music producer who wanted to record her, about the nonprofit that helped artists in financial hardship, about all these people who seemed to believe in her more than she believed in herself. The thing was, Maya wasn't 17 anymore. She was 28, with responsibilities and bills and a life that didn't just pause because a video went viral. Her mother still struggled with debt from her father's medical bills. Her brother was in community college now, working part-time to help pay for it. Maya sent money home when she could. How could she just drop everything and go back to school? How could she be that selfish? But Mr. Davidson, kind as always, had other ideas. One morning before the cafe opened, he sat her down with a cup of coffee. "I've been thinking," he said. "What if we did something official? 1 hour every Saturday afternoon. You play for whoever wants to come listen. We'll make it a special event." Maya's first instinct was to say no, to make excuses. but she found herself nodding instead. "Okay," she whispered. "I can do that." That first Saturday, over 100 people showed up. They packed into the cafe and spilled out onto the sidewalk. Someone had donated money to have the piano professionally tuned and restored. When Maya sat down at the bench, the keys felt different under her fingers. Better, more responsive. The piano actually sounded like it was supposed to now. Her hands were shaking so badly she thought she might not be able to play at all. All these people, all these eyes watching her, waiting for her to be as good as that viral video had made her seem. What if she couldn't do it? What if that moment had been a fluke? But then she started playing and everything else fell away. She played pieces she'd learned as a teenager, music that had been locked in her memory all these years. Chopin nocturnes that felt like whispered secrets, a Debussy prelude that sounded like rainfall, a Rachmaninoff piece that required her to stretch her hands across the keys in ways that made her fingers ache. When she finished, the applause was so loud it startled her. People were crying, actually crying. A man in his 50s approached her afterward, shaking his head in amazement. "I've been to concerts at Carnegie Hall," he said. "You belong there. You know that, right?" Maya didn't know what to say to that. But then a woman stepped forward, elegant and professional looking, probably in her 60s. She had kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Ms. Maya," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Dr. Patricia Williams from the Portland Conservatory of Music. I've been hoping to meet you." Maya's heart jumped into her throat. She shook the woman's hand, which felt surreal. This was the person who'd sent that email, the director of an actual conservatory. "I know this must all be overwhelming," Dr. Williams continued, "but I meant what I said in my email. I'd like to offer you a full scholarship to complete your degree with us. We have a work-study program that would help cover living expenses, and we're flexible with scheduling for students who have other obligations." Maya opened her mouth, but no words came out. A full scholarship. A real chance to finish what she'd started all those years ago. It felt like a dream, the kind you wake up from disappointed. "I don't know if I can," Maya finally managed. "I have rent and I help support my family, and I'm so much older than your other students would be." "You're 28, Dr. Williams said gently. "I have students in their 40s, 50s, even 60s. It's never too late to pursue what you love. And as for the financial concerns, we can work something out. That's what the work-study program is for." Other people approached after Dr. Williams stepped aside. A music producer named Tom who worked with independent classical artists. He handed her a business card and said he'd love to record her, that he thought people would pay to listen to her music. A representative from a foundation that specifically helped musicians who'd had to leave the field due to hardship. They offered grants, mentorship, connections to teachers, and performance opportunities. The attention was overwhelming. Maya felt like she was drowning in possibility. These were the kinds of opportunities she'd dreamed about at 17. But she wasn't that girl anymore. That girl had been naive, unburdened by real loss and real responsibility. This woman who stood here now knew what it cost to sacrifice your dreams. She knew what it meant to choose survival over passion. That night in her tiny apartment, Maya sat on her bed holding Dr. Williams's business card. She thought about her father, about how proud he'd been when that Juilliard acceptance letter arrived. She remembered him driving her to piano lessons 3 times a week, sitting in the waiting room doing crossword puzzles, because he said her music was worth the gas money and the time. She remembered his face when she told him she was deferring school to help take care of him. "No," he'd said, so firmly it scared her. "You can't give this up for me," but she had, because what else could she do? Watch her mother work herself to death? Let her little brother drop out of school? Some choices weren't really choices at all. Except now, maybe. She had a real choice again. Maya picked up her phone and stared at it for a long time. Then, before she could talk herself out of it, she dialed the number on Dr. Williams' card. It rang 3 times before someone answered. "Hello? Dr. Williams? This is Maya, the waitress from the cafe." She took a deep breath. "I'd like to talk about that scholarship, if the offer is still available." There was a pause, then Dr. Williams' voice came back warm and genuine. "Of course it is. I'm so glad you called. When would you like to meet?" They set up a time for Monday morning. When Maya hung up, her hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from something else, something that felt dangerously close to hope. She lay back on her bed and stared at the ceiling. What would her father think if he could see her now? Would he be proud that she'd sacrificed so much for family? Or would he be disappointed that she'd given up on the thing that made her come alive? Maybe she thought he'd be proud of both. Proud that she'd done what needed to be done, and proud that she was finally letting herself dream again. Outside her window, the city lights twinkled in the darkness. Somewhere out there, over 1 million people had watched her play piano. They didn't know her story. They didn't know about the bills or the grief or the years of pushing down who she really was. 6 months later, Maya stood backstage at the Portland Conservatory's concert hall, smoothing down her black dress for the 10th time. She could hear the murmur of the audience through the heavy curtain. Hundreds of people out there waiting for her. Her heart was pounding so hard she wondered if anyone else could hear it. This was her scholarship recital, a requirement for all first-year students. But it had become something bigger than that. Dr. Williams had invited music critics, talent scouts, representatives from other conservatories, even some professional pianists Maya had only read about. The pressure should have crushed her. Instead, she felt strangely calm. A stage manager gave her a 5-minute warning. Maya closed her eyes and took a slow breath. The last 6 months had been the hardest and most rewarding of her life. She'd enrolled part-time at the conservatory while still working reduced hours at the cafe. Mr. Davidson had been incredibly understanding, adjusting her schedule so she could attend classes and practice sessions. Some days she worked the morning shift, then rushed to afternoon classes, then practiced until the conservatory closed at 10. She'd fall into bed exhausted, wake up at 5, and do it all over again. Her old teacher, Mrs. Chen, had cried when Maya called her. They'd reconnected immediately, and Mrs. Chen had been giving her extra coaching sessions for free, refusing to accept payment. "You were my most talented student," she'd said. "I'm just grateful to see you playing again." But it hadn't been easy. Maya's hands had been so out of practice at first. Her fingers cramped. Her back ached from hours at the piano. There were nights when she'd wanted to quit, when the gap between where she was and where she used to be felt too wide to cross. She'd lie awake wondering if she was fooling herself, if she was too old, too rusty, too far behind the other students who'd never stopped training. One particularly bad night, she'd called her mother crying. "I don't know if I can do this," she'd sobbed. "Everyone else is so much better. They've been practicing this whole time while I was serving coffee." Her mother had been quiet for a moment. Then she'd said something Maya would never forget. "Your father used to tell me that talent is what you're born with, but character is what you build. You have both, baby. Don't you dare give up now." So Maya hadn't given up. She'd practiced harder, listened more carefully to her teachers, pushed through the frustration and the doubt. Slowly, her hands remembered. The muscle memory came back, and with it, something new. She wasn't the same pianist she'd been at 17. That girl had been technically skilled but hadn't really lived yet. This woman, shaped by loss and sacrifice and survival, brought something deeper to the music. 2 minutes, the stage manager whispered. Maya walked to the edge of the curtain and peeked out at the audience. The concert hall was completely full. In the front row, she could see her mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, and she hadn't even started playing yet. Next to her sat Maya's younger brother, now 19 and looking uncomfortable in a dress shirt. Mr. Davidson was there with his wife, Lisa from the bookstore, Mrs. Chen, and scattered throughout the audience were faces she recognized from the cafe. Regular customers who'd become friends, people who'd followed her journey from that viral video to this moment. She also saw the teenage girl who'd recorded that first video. Her name was Riley, and they'd met properly a few weeks after everything happened. Riley had been so apologetic, worried she'd invaded Maya's privacy. But Maya had hugged her and thanked her. Sometimes the best things happen when we least expect them. The lights in the auditorium dimmed. The audience fell silent. Maya walked out onto the stage, and the applause started immediately. It was warm and encouraging, not just polite. These people wanted her to succeed. She sat at the grand piano, so different from that dusty upright in the cafe. This instrument was perfect, pristine, every key responsive and in tune. She adjusted the bench, positioned her hands, and let the silence settle. Then she began to play. The program was ambitious. She'd chosen a Beethoven sonata that pushed her technical limits, followed by Chopin pieces that required delicate emotional control, and finally a contemporary composition that was rhythmically complex and physically demanding. As her hands moved across the keys, Maya thought about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about her father, how he'd driven her to every lesson and never complained about the cost. She thought about the medical bills that had buried her dreams for so long. She thought about the years serving coffee, walking past that piano every day, pretending she was someone she wasn't. She thought about the moment her hands finally touched those keys again, how it had felt like coming home after being lost for years. All of that emotion poured into her playing. The Beethoven was powerful and precise, but it also carried weight beyond the notes themselves. The Chopin sang with a bittersweet beauty that made several people in the audience cry, and the contemporary piece crackled with an energy that had everyone leaning forward in their seats. When she played the final note, there was a moment of perfect silence. That sacred pause when music ends and reality hasn't quite rushed back in yet. Then the entire audience rose to their feet. The applause was thunderous, echoing off the walls of the concert hall. Maya stood and bowed, tears streaming down her face. She looked at her mother, who was sobbing openly now. She looked at all these people who'd supported her, believed in her, given her this second chance, and she felt something she hadn't felt in 11 years. She felt like herself again. At the reception afterward, people surrounded her. The music producer, Tom, offered her a recording contract on the spot. Representatives from 2 other conservatories invited her to apply to their graduate programs, both with full funding. A concert organizer asked if she'd be interested in performing at a summer music festival. The opportunities kept coming, each one more incredible than the last. But the moment that mattered most came from a young woman, maybe 19 years old, who approached Maya shyly near the end of the evening. She had calloused fingers that suggested she played guitar. "I need to tell you something," the girl said quietly. "I saw your video 6 months ago, the one from the cafe. I'd quit music to work full-time because I couldn't afford to keep studying." She paused, her eyes filling with tears. "But watching you play in that cafe, seeing someone else who'd had to give up their dream, it made me pick up my guitar again. I just got accepted to community college for their music program." She grabbed Maya's hand. "Thank you. Thank you for reminding me that it's never too late." Maya hugged this stranger who wasn't really a stranger at all. They understood each other in a way that didn't need explaining. That's when Maya truly understood the gift of everything that had happened, not just the scholarship or the opportunities or even getting to play again. It was knowing that her story, her struggle, her refusal to give up, had helped someone else find their way back to their own dream. Later that night, driving home through the quiet city streets, Maya thought about the girl she'd been at 17. So talented but so naive. She thought about the woman she'd become through loss and hardship. And she thought about who she was now, some combination of both. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Williams. "Extraordinary performance tonight. Your father would be so proud." Maya pulled over and sat in her car, letting herself cry. Not sad tears this time. Not even happy tears exactly. Just tears of release, of gratitude, of finally allowing herself to feel everything she'd been holding back for so long. She was proud too. Proud of the girl who'd sacrificed everything for her family. Proud of the woman who'd survived when surviving felt impossible. And proud of the pianist who'd found her way back to the music, scarred but stronger for it. Tomorrow she'd go back to the cafe for her morning shift. She'd make coffee and serve pastries and chat with customers. But she'd also go to her afternoon classes. She'd practice for hours. She'd keep building this new life, one note at a time, because Maya had learned something important. You don't have to choose between who you were and who you've become. You can be both. The waitress and the pianist. The survivor and the artist. The person who sacrifices and the person who dreams.